your.
It's unanimous every time. When it comes to sanctions, it's unanimous every time. And that's the danger of endless war. That there's no money for health care. There's no money for the schools. I'm Sarah Flounders. I'm one of the many organizations here pulling together. We're very honored that it's Susan Schnall, the new president of Veterans for Peace nationally. Please join me in welcoming Susan.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Peace Rally. We are for peace. We are veterans for peace. We have been to war, and we say no more war. We have seen it. No more war. No more war. No war with Russia. No war near Ukraine. No more war. I looked at some of the formations of how war started in the First World War. Do you all remember? It was agreement after agreement after agreement, and countries fell, and 40 million people died in the First World War because there were these types of agreements that we still have with NATO. With NATO, tell NATO no. We are going to come out. No NATO. What were we shouting earlier? No NATO. No NATO, no war. No NATO, no war. No NATO, no war. Do you know, with all the countries in NATO, that one of the countries from South America is Colombia? What on earth is Colombia doing as part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? We say no, we will not be pulled into another war. We need to take care of people medically. We need to give social services to people. We need to improve our educational system. And we at Veterans for Peace are saying no more war, so join us. Yeah. No war. No war. No war. No NATO, no war. No NATO, no war. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. We have several organizations here, and I'm just going to ask folks to do just as Susan did. Come up from both the Answer Coalition, from CODEPINK, from Struggle a Lucha, from Workers' World, from Peace Action. Let's just take a quick roll here of several speakers, because there's enormous unity in saying no to NATO, no to war, and we need the money for jobs and health care and schools right here.
And housing!
Another mass destruction. I'm going to pass the mic now to Larry Holmes from Workers' World Party. Then we'll hear from
Comrades and soldiers, I'm so glad that we could be here together. It's cold as hell, but we're mad as hell, and we're here to say no war. I want to thank all the groups, the Answer Coalition, Struggle a Lucha, Internationalist Group, Veterans for Peace, Socialist Action, some of us old-timers who have been marching since the 60s are still around. And also next generation people that you got to take over. Here to have this solidarity against imperialism, imperialist war, and U.S. imperialism. A lot of people think, you know, it's a small thing, this aggression against Russia, using Ukraine. But it's more than that, and you know it. Part of the reason why you're here. This is the U.S. capitalist ruling class and the Pentagon gearing up for World War III. And after Russia, you know where they're going.
China!
It's China. And they'll destroy the planet. in carnage if they're not stopped. Let me just end by saying this. From a strategic point of view, all my good friends at Frizzo too, thank you. From a strategic point of view, our next job, comrades and friends, is to go to the workers. Go to the workers in a big way. They don't want this war. They want answers. What's going on? It's up to us to tell them. Because when capitalism sinks into a deeper crisis, you know what they do? They turn to fascism, and then they turn to imperialist war. We don't want this crisis of capitalism turned into fascism or war. We want it turned into the end of capitalism. So, marching orders, time to go to the working class. Thank you.
Next up, we got Sally Jones from New York Peace Action.
Hi, everybody. Let me take a picture of you beautiful people. Today, there are at least 8 other demonstrations of no war over Ukraine all across New York State that we know about at Peace Action New York State. And, you know, this is really important to get out. I don't care how cold it is. I think Syracuse might have gotten snowed in, but it's really important to get out and get our voices to our representatives, to our neighbors, and get the word to Congress. Don't send any more weapons. What is the reason for NATO? You know, we need to cooperate with Russia on climate change, on all of the issues that this world faces. We need cooperation. We do not need this kind of tension and this kind of war machine ramping up for what? And the Ukrainian people caught in the middle. This is really outrageous. So please get your voices out. Tell people, tell your representatives, no weapons, negotiate. Do not escalate. Thank you.
Negotiate. Do not escalate.
Thank you, Sally.
Negotiate.
From the Latin area, from Call to Action on Puerto Rico.
Do not escalate.
Buenas tardes, compañeros y compañeras. I'm from a Call to Action on Puerto Rico. We are the example of U.S. colonialism in the Americas. We are the oldest colony in the United States. And on Friday, 16,000 teachers took to the streets because they want to eliminate the labor rights and unionism in our country. We, the Puerto Rican people, stand with Ukraine against war, and Russia against war, because we have been living in a constant war since 1898, and our people are suffering from the vulture capitalists that are benefiting from the austerity measures that are being put in place by a fiscal control board, a dictatorial fiscal control board that is slashing essential services for people and not providing adequate health care. And that's why there's so many COVID cases in Puerto Rico. And the fact that so many capitalists and the prices are going up in terms of housing, and people are being forced to exile into the United States. So we stand with the Ukrainian people. And we also know, because we have had Natalie Jaresko, who has headed the Fiscal Control Board, who also was involved in the refinancing in Ukraine. And people, working class people, suffered from that. We know that capitalists want to go to Ukraine so they can plummet and they can basically take advantage of the working class. That's why we have to unite together as the working class against capitalism and against these imperialists because we feel directly the effects of this. So I tell you, support the people of Puerto Rico, support the people of Ukraine. Unite the United States, the working class, and let's unite with the world against capitalism now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Healthcare, not war. Housing,
Healthcare, not war. Housing, healthcare, not war.
Next up, we're going to hear from Kay from Answer Coalition.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. I wanted to ask you all a question. I was wondering, does anyone here wake up in the morning and think to themselves, you know, the United States just doesn't have enough nuclear weapons? No? Does anyone wake up and think the US doesn't have enough ballistic missiles? No. You know, I don't think that either. I don't think the US needs more nuclear weapons, and neither do you. And we certainly didn't vote for that.
No, we didn't.
But that's what we're getting under this administration. The Biden administration allocated $43 billion for more nuclear weapons. And you gotta ask yourself, you know, why is this happening? You know, we don't want this. No one asked for this. Why is this happening? You know, some people will say, oh, well, it's because Biden's naive. You know, he doesn't understand international politics or war and diplomacy. But Biden's not naive. You know, he was in the government when the United States invaded Iraq, invaded Afghanistan. He supported those wars. So he knows exactly what's going to happen when the U.S. goes to war with Russia. It's not a mistake. It's not an accident. It's an intentional policy. And if it's intentional, you got to ask yourself, why is this happening? We didn't ask for this. And the answer is, he's not asking you if you want war with Russia. He's not asking us, do we want war or peace? He's not asking us, do you like Russia or do you hate Russia? Just like they don't ask us about anything in this society. They don't ask us, do you want more money for education or cops? They don't ask us, do you want more money for healthcare or the military? So if this war isn't being waged in our interests, you gotta ask yourself, who is this war being waged for? Who benefits from war with Russia? And the answer is, it's weapons manufacturers, it's banks, it's multinational corporations that want to see their competition obliterated. That's who benefits. So this war is not being waged in our interest, despite everything Biden says. You know, they love to say, oh, well, this war, this is for national security. Since when do these people care about security? Our security. 800,000 people just died of COVID in this country. They don't care about security. Last time I remember, a few summers ago, they were tear gassing and hog-tying teenagers who were protesting racism. They don't care about security. So, you know, they will tell you anything to get you to accept the war narrative so they can make money. They'll tell you anything. But you gotta ask yourself, you know, what do you call this? When you vote for a government, when you put someone in power, when you give them a mandate and say, we need you to legislate on our behalf. We want you to represent us, to advocate for us. And not only do they not do that, they take our money and they advocate against us. They screw us over. They bail out the banks. They spend more money on missiles and they defund the schools. What do you call that besides criminal? That's what these people are. They're criminals. So what are we saying at the Answer Coalition? We're saying, remember who the real criminals are. It's not Russia. It wasn't Russia that forced workers to go back to work in the middle of the pandemic so their boss can make a little more money. That wasn't Russia. It wasn't Russia that knelt on George Floyd's neck for 9.5 minutes. That was not Russia. It's not Russia that's foreclosing on people's houses and evicting people in the winter, right now. That's our government. Those are American corporations. So, you know, these people, they don't listen to us. We can't reason with them. we've tried that. We've said, please don't go to war. They're not going to listen because these aren't reasonable people we're dealing with. The only way to stop this war with Russia is to march on them, to shut down society until they're forced, until they have no choice but to end this war. And, unfortunately, we don't have enough people to do that today. But what we can do is go home and organize. What we're not going to do is go home, come back to the next rally, and hope that 100,000 people show up.
Right.
You got to motivate people to come. You got to tell them that this is an important issue. And people might say, "Oh, well, why should I care about the war? I got all these bills. I can't pay my rent." You got to tell them the reason you can't pay your rent is because we spend $1 trillion a year on war. Housing is a war issue. The war is a housing issue.
That's right.
So, this war with Russia, this could mean, this could threaten the life on Earth. This is a war of catastrophic proportions. So, I want to encourage everyone here to organize and to carry themselves with the severity of the issue we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Next up, we're going to hear from Margaret Kimberly with the Black Agenda Report, Black Alliance for Peace. We have about 8 requests, so everybody, keep it short. It's getting cold, but we want to hear from each of the groups who are represented out here today. So, Margaret Kimberly.
Power to the people. Power to the people. Thank you all so much for coming out here today. I think I'm going to try to keep my remarks simple. Who was in charge in 2014 when the United States backed a coup which overthrew the elected president of Ukraine?
Right.
Joe Biden. Joe Biden was the viceroy, in effect, of Ukraine.
Yep.
And ever since that time, he has been committed to finishing this job, this horrible job of trying to pull this country away from Russia and destroying it in the process. What have we seen? Tales of Russian troops on the border with manipulated photos. By the way, did that remind anybody else of WMD?
Oh, yeah.
Of the weapons of mass destruction and photos which allegedly showed that there were chemical weapons in Iraq which nobody ever found. So when you see this quote-unquote proof, you have to think about the Gulf of Tonkin resolution and the Viagra given to Libyan soldiers and the WMD and all of it. And there's finally some cracks. Finally, the corporate media are beginning to say to the Biden administration, this does not make sense. That there will be crisis actors in Ukraine and Russia will manufacture something. The manufacturing will be in Washington. So there is nothing good about U.S. interventions, ever. The U.S. and NATO are destructive forces in the world. So I'm going to read very briefly from a Black Alliance for Peace statement, just the last few paragraphs. Whatever the explanation, it is clear that for African people, the U.S., NATO, EU axis of domination continues to represent the greatest threat to peace, human rights, and social justice on the planet today. That is why it's so absurd to see the Black misleadership class lining up to demonstrate their support for war with Russia, while Black people still face the structural violence of capitalism and the terror of state violence from the domestic army occupying our communities that are referred to as the police. BAP says it is irrational for any African to embrace the agenda of empire by giving credence to or legitimacy to the crude mobilization of public opinion for conflict on behalf of NATO, a structure created to perpetuate white power and the colonial capitalist project. We are clear, we say once again, not one drop of blood from Black workers, the colonized and nationally oppressed, in defense of the U.S. capitalist oligarchy. And that is who is in charge of this effort, this very, very dangerous effort that brings this country into conflict with another nuclear power. So we say no to NATO, no to NATO expansion, yes to diplomacy, yes to international law, and we oppose this effort. No war on Russia, no to NATO. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
NATO.
No to NATO.
No to NATO.
No to NATO. No to NATO.
Next up, we're going to hear from Bill Doris from Struggle La Lucha.
55 years ago, on this island, Dr. Martin Luther King denounced the horrors of the war in Vietnam, and he said that the bombs that fall on Vietnam also explode in our communities. They destroy our healthcare, our schools, our hospitals. That is even more true, 1,000 times more true today. When our healthcare system is collapsing, when millions are facing eviction, homelessness, medical debt, school debt. They say they can't afford the Build Back Better Act, but they have endless money for war and destruction around the world. And this is not an accident that it costs too much. They want it to cost too much. The Pentagon budget, the CIA budget, the DOE budget, that's the Department of Energy, are all deliberate theft from the working class and oppressed communities of this country because they want to keep people poor and desperate and working for low wages. But it's more than that, it's bigger than the military-industrial complex. Like the war in Vietnam, the war against Iraq, the wars that are raging in Syria and Yemen with U.S. bombs, the U.S. ships in the South China Sea, the sanctions on Iran and Venezuela. The goal is destruction, because it is only war and destruction that can preserve the obsolete place of Wall Street and the U.S. dollar in the world economy. And they are willing to risk global destruction for that purpose. Russia has said it's not going to invade Ukraine. Ukraine has said Russia is not going to invade Ukraine. Germany has said Russia is not going to invade Ukraine. Only the U.S. says that Russia is going to invade Ukraine, both Republicans and Democrats, because the U.S. corporate ruling class is being driven to war by financial necessity. Their profits, the value of their capital depends on war. But their profits, their wealth, does nothing for us here. It does nothing for the working class. It does nothing for the oppressed communities. It does nothing for Harlem. It does nothing for Harlan County. We want to shut down the Pentagon. We want to bring all the troops home. We don't want war with Russia. We don't want war with China, with Yemen. We want to end aid to Israel and a free Palestine. We need money for jobs and schools and housing. We need that money back. And that can only happen if they're not going to give it to us. It can only happen if we have a mass movement. A mass movement that can shut down the country against our real enemy. Money for jobs, not for war. No war with Russia. Money for jobs, not for war. No war with Russia. Not for war. No war with Russia.
Money for jobs, not for war. No war with Russia.
Okay, next up, we're going to hear from Alex from the Workers' Assembly Against Racism. And we got to fight racism, not Russia. Fight racism, not Russia.
Fight racism, not Russia. Fight racism, not Russia. Fight racism, not Russia. Fight racism, not Russia. Fight racism, not Russia.
Does anyone have any idea what the military budget was this year? Around 800, right? So I don't know if you guys have ever seen that urban planning and development quote about how much it would cost to end homelessness in this country, and it's around 20 billion. So if we get into this nonsense war with Russia, I can guarantee you they're going to spend more than those 20 billion. we might not even invade. Nobody might invade, and there might be 20 billion added to the next military budget, and the next military budget after that, up and up and up and up and up. So we must stand up and say, no war with Russia. The only war we're fighting is a class war. Thank you.
Okay, next up we got Maria Inoue of the nuclear ban.
Hello, my name is Maria Inoue. I'm with a group called the Hand Project for a Nuclear Free World, and I'm the president who is with the New York campaign against nuclear weapons. I'm here today because I just wanted to know that on January 22nd, 2021, there was a historical moment, which is that a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons entered into force and categorically prohibited nuclear weapons under international law. This doesn't apply to the United States, however, this law became international law because countries of global south raised the voice against nuclear power states that enough is enough. We have to abolish nuclear weapons. And as a people, as a group of the United States, we have to reach out to our government officials that we need diplomacy with other nuclear armed states, especially Russia. We don't want to fight. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, brothers and sisters. I thank each and every one of you for deciding today to organize for peace instead of war. I thank each and every one of you for exercising the right, your voice, your feet, your heart, to connect with others across the world like you and I. Do you know there are gatherings like this all around the world? North, south, east and west, in every nation, in villages and towns. People like you and I, whose hearts beat for peace and not for war. You are human beings. You are exercising democracy, citizenship, your humanity by being here today for peace. I am so moved to be with you in this square in New York City, sending a message of solidarity to brothers and sisters across the world, that we will not allow ourselves or the governments to go to war in our name. We are here for peace. I thank you, and I thank you for what you've done in New York by saying no to nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Yes, peace. No nukes. Yes, peace. No nukes. Yes, peace.
No nukes.
Okay, I'm going to get Michaela up here to help us on a few chants from the International League of People's Struggle.
Hello, everyone. It's really cold, and everybody before me has done some incredible things. So I want you to repeat after me so we can warm up a little bit. And I want all of New York City to hear us. All right? All right, let's go with the first one. From Ukraine to the Philippines, stop the U.S. war machine. From Ukraine to the Philippines,
Stop the U.S. war machine.
from Ukraine to the Philippines,
Stop the U.S. war machine.
from Ukraine to the Philippines.
Stop the U.S. war machine.
All right, here's another one. Money for jobs and education, not for war and occupation.
Money for jobs and education, not for war and occupation.
Money for jobs and education, not for war and occupation.
Money for jobs and education, not for war and occupation.
Let's do it one more. Hands off!
Ukraine!
Hands off!
Ukraine!
Hands off!
Ukraine!
Hands off!
Ukraine!
Thank you.
Bravo!
We need the demands, Okay, next up we're going to hear from Marty from Socialist Action. Marty.
Yay, Marty!
All right,
Thank you, comrades and friends. Thank you for being here. This is going to be the beginning of a great movement. If Biden continues his mad rush into war in the Ukraine, has been said, Biden was part of the administration that orchestrated a fascist coup in the Ukraine. The Eastern European fascist movement was responsible for some of the worst atrocities of the Second World War. And that is who we're going to go to war for if Biden and Putin get into an insane war based on bullshit, just bullshit. Even the president of the Ukraine is telling Biden, cool it, you're exaggerating what's going on. Of course, the Ukrainian army is mobilizing in the Ukraine, and Russia is mobilizing to stop what Ukraine is doing. We say, US, UN, out of the Ukraine. No war. No war for gas and the insanity of climate change. We don't want a single penny to go to the Pentagon. Close the 800 military bases around the world. Shut them down. Zero for the war machine in the United States. Okay, I just wanted to put in a word or two about Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange, who told us about war crimes and educating a generation on the crimes of U.S. imperialism. Free Julian Assange, free Mumia Abu Jamal, free Leonard Peltier, and all political prisoners. Thank you.
Okay, next up, we're going to hear from Jamie Bauer from Rise and Resist. Amy.
Hey everybody. I want to thank all the organizers for getting everybody out on such short notice for this. The Biden administration will tell you that we are going to protect Ukraine because democracy is important and Russia is threatening democracy in the Ukraine. And we know that that is not the reason why the U.S. government, not we, is getting involved in this. And what we say in Rise and Resist is, what about democracy at home? Biden wants to look strong, but this is not what looking strong is. If you want to look strong, get voting rights passed in this country. If you want to look strong, get gun control laws passed in this country. If you want to look strong, instead of threatening war, to get Build Back Better passed. Every dollar that goes to the military is a dollar that could go to housing, a dollar that could go to minimum income, a dollar that could go to schools. So when we say that we want Biden to be strong, that's where we see strength, not in saber rattling, but in creating and maintaining some sense of democracy at home. We have a former president who has said that he tried to overturn the election and who has said that the vice president at the time should have overturned the election. We have a problem with authoritarianism at home. We need to address that here, and we need to focus on what's going on here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Julie Finch from the Quakers to please come up. And then we're going to hear from Will from the Internationalist Group.
Hi, everybody. The Quakers have been against
war since the 1660s. And I am horrified that we might go to war with Russia. That's outrageous. Are you fucking kidding me? With all these nuclear weapons on their hands, that's just outrageous. You guys have got to stop. You have to negotiate. Thank you very much. And by the way, I am speaking for the War Resisters League as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, we got Will from the Internationalist Group.
Now, the United States has unleashed a non-stop propaganda campaign accusing Russia of preparing an invasion of Ukraine. This is a lie. It's straight up imperialist propaganda to cover the fact that the United States is actually preparing a war on China. Meanwhile, Democrat Biden is trying to look tough after his ignominious exit from Afghanistan. The Internationalist Group and the League for the Fourth International called to defend China against imperialism and counter-revolution, just as we stand for the defense of other bureaucratically deformed worker states, including North Korea, Cuba, and Vietnam. All the hype in the media about Russia's military buildup around Ukraine is sucker bait. Nobody lines up trucks and tanks in front of to be in formation to be photographed by satellite technology in order to prepare an invasion. As the former US commander of NATO said yesterday, this is all for show. What Putin is doing is showing that Russia could do what Russia could do if the imperialists extend their anti-Russia alliance, NATO, to include Ukraine. Now, this is not about budget priorities, about books, not bombs, as liberals like CODEPINK and various reformist pseudo-socialists pretend. It's about imperialist war propaganda and war moves. The kinds of sanctions Biden is talking about are acts of war. The US used sanctions like these in the 1930s to push Japan into the imperialist World War II. As revolutionary Marxists, as Trotskyists, we are intransigently opposed to imperialism, US imperialism in particular, because the United States, under Biden, under Trump, under Obama, seeks to rule the world. We call it to spike US war threats and provocations over Ukraine. The Internationalist Group called for the defense of called for the defeat of the United States invasion of Afghanistan from day one, and even before that, from the 14th of September 2001, 3 days after 9/11. This past August, after 20 years of imperialist occupation, we said that the US defeat in Afghanistan was a very good thing for working people, enough, even though the takeover of the Taliban was no victory for Afghan women and workers and oppressed national minorities. All right. We oppose calls to defend Ukraine, whose government is the product of the 2014 Maidan coup, engineered by the Obama government and spearheaded by Ukrainian fascistic and fascist ultra-rightists. They immediately went after the Russian-speaking eastern half of Ukraine, outlawing Russian in official business and schools, provoking the uprising of the Donetsk. And Luhansk, and dispatching fascist stormtroops in a failed attempt to crush rebels. We say Ukrainian fascists and nationalities, hands off Donetsk and Luhansk.
Okay, next up, we got Jack Baldwin from the Green Party.
Hello. Hello, I'm Jack Baldwin. I'm staff. I also belong to Extinction Rebellion and the Manhattan Project for a Nuclear Free World. I hate the cold, but I hate war more. I hate the cold, capitalism more. I hate the cold, but I hate climate chaos more. And that's why I'm here. And I want to ask good, progressive people who voted for Joe Biden, how's that lesser evil strategy working out for you now? The message I have for you today is that if you consistently vote defensively, if you consistently vote for someone awful to keep someone more awful out of office, you will never get what you want. That's right. It's only when you vote for what you want will you have a chance to actually get it. And if you actively support electoral reform, there will be no accusations of spoilers for third-party candidates who are trying to enact a progressive agenda, who are trying to stop war, who are trying to increase jobs, who are trying to dismantle the military-industrial complex. Biden is being, seen as some kind of sage, but he just made it. He just enabled China and Russia to unite against the U.S. undoing decades of foreign policy strategy. They don't know what they're doing. They're not wise and they're fools. And you have to vote your conscience, not fear. Thank you.
Bravo, Jack. Bravo.
All right, I think we're going to bring the grannies up here to end this program, and we're going to ask Zul to close it out. In closing it today, I want to say the U.S. reached 900,000 COVID deaths today, and that is a cost of endless war. That's a cost of no money for health care. It's a cost of destruction around the world and destruction right here at home. So we are demanding health care, not warfare.
Right.
Health care, not warfare. Health care, not warfare. Health care, not warfare. Now is it the grannies or Zulus? Okay, all right. I think the grannies are going to close us out, and then Zul is going to jump up here. But for everyone who came in the cold today, and so many who came and had to leave, we're going to keep going because it's a dangerous, dangerous minute. And we only hear about troops in Russia moving inside their own country. 100,000 Russian troops. There are 3.5 million NATO forces. That's the size of the NATO military machine. It's U.S. commanded, U.S. equipped. It is a danger to the world. And we just got to know how deep the danger is. It's a war the Democrats and the Republicans are absolutely together on. They say there's some difference between the two when it comes to the military budget, when it comes to war, when it comes to sanctions. They're together. And they're also together saying there's no money for us right here. So we got to keep fighting, and we will. Okay, the grannies, please, let's do it with music. Let's do it with drums. Thank you.
You got song sheets, sing along with us. Grannies. Hi, grannies. We endless wars. We shall not pay for endless wars. We shall not pay for endless wars. We'll pay for jobs and health and education, not for endless wars. We don't want our weapons bombing Syria. We don't want our weapons bombing Yemen. We demand this of our government. Sing it! No more endless wars. Congress, work on new jobs, not for endless wars. Work for global justice, not for endless wars. We want to work on opportunities at home, not for endless wars. Sing with us. No more endless wars. There's no
business like war business. There's no business like war business, the worst business we know. Never mind the homeless and the hungry. Never mind the people without jobs. Nowhere can you get that special feeling that when you're piling up the bombs. There's no business like war business. No business like no. Multinational profits going through the sky. They multiply while children die. The same amount of student clothes for everyone. All over the world. All over the world. Thank you for the radio. No war. No war.
No power like the power of the people, cause the power of the people don't stop. What?
Ain't no power like the power of the people, cause the power of the people don't stop. Whoa. Ain't no power like the power of the people, cause the power of the people don't stop. No.
Money for food, not for war.
Right. Money for food, not for war. Money for food, not for war. Money for food.
Thank you.
Ready.
Today, we're not just here in Times Square. In 35 other cities in the U.S. and in the last oh my God, it's 75.
75.
Even trying to keep the list, trying to keep the numbers, it's an incredible turnout because we're not here alone. And where is the corporate media? Where is the corporate media today?
Good question.
So I want to thank all the people's media who came out.
Thank you,
because
media.
The people's media is the voice of the people.
Yes.
The corporate media is 100% for war, and they blare it at us time and again. So in 75 cities, even if there's one person that stands up, but it's far more than one today. So for everyone who came, we're going to let Zul, who really helped pull this together, artist, producer, organizer with Rising Together, a coalition of coalitions connecting issues, inequality, militarism, and sustainability. So let's have Zul get the last word, and we're going to keep going.
Zul!
Love is a tree. Yes.
How's that? Good.
Love is a tree.
A tree.
With branches in forever. And roots in eternity. And a trunk nowhere at all. Hello, New York.
Hello.
Is this the United States of America? You know, if any of us sneeze or cough here in Times Square this afternoon, and some of us will, people in London and Tokyo will catch cold tomorrow, and people in Afghanistan and Yemen and maybe Ukraine will drop dead the next day.
Yep.
We live in the United States of Amazon.
Yep.
There's one global political economy, and you know what it's called. Is there a government in any country today, Democratic, Republican, Tory, Labor, Communist, dictatorial, so many of those, Putin, Duterte, Bolsonaro, will be here all night if I name all the dictators, and almost all of them are allies of this government. Is there a government in this world that doesn't do the bidding of the corporate states? The billionaire owners of Congress, Parliament, Pinyin, Politburo, Kremlin, Knesset, corporate shills, all. Where will we hear the people's voices? Is it here?
Are we willing to climb to the highest rooftops in this city, in every community, town, country, every so-called nation state? Will we proclaim from the rooftops, not one more senseless, endless fucking war?
Right, right. Thank you.
What are these war hawks, neocon and neoliberal alike, beating the war drums for? Why does the corporate media broadcast polite, pretty lies? What is war good for?
Nothing.
Endless profits for the wealthy?
Yep.
What is war good for?
Nothing.
Ever more control for the powerful? Who profits?
The wealthy.
Who dies?
The people.
We die.
We die.
The people die. People just like us will die in Ukraine, in Russia, and the girls and boys from New York City, from America, they will die. They will come back in body bags once again with the powerful salute, and the masses fall in line with patriotic hysteria.
Yep, yep.
Could it be another way?
Yes.
Could the people here and in the streets everywhere put an end to the next senseless, endless fucking war before it begins?
Right.
Nearly 21 years ago, 100 of us protested at the recruiting station just over there, trying to stop a war before it began. The endless war that just so chaotically ended was started then. There wasn't enough of us in the streets to stop that senseless, endless fucking war. Not many more years after 9/11 has it become known. Interesting that that's the code number for an emergency. 10 million of us, 10 million of us around the world were in the streets hoping to stop another senseless, endless fucking war.
Yes.
Fabricated by the drumbeats of war hawks, neocon and neoliberal alike, amplified by the polite, pretty lies of the corporate media. Will it happen again? Goddamn right it will, unless there are more of our asses in the streets, because it's always our asses that get kicked, and the asses of the corporate media broadcast at least one voice of dissension, one voice of reason, one voice of sanity, one voice of sensibility, one voice of love. Love!
Love!
What is love? Deception? Destruction?
No.
Death?
No.
It is not. Love is the revolutionary act of compassion. Love is truth. Love is justice. Justice for people. Justice for planet. For all who will live and will not die. For all who will live and will not die.
Will not kill. Right.
Excuse me, I'm flipping the page. My fingers are frozen. Not for profit, not for control. We can't stop these senseless, endless, fucking wars.
Yes.
We can.
We can.
We need to be in the streets. Our families' lives are at stake, and they need to be in the streets. Our friends' lives are at stake, and they need to be in the streets. Our neighbors' lives are at stake, and they need to be in the streets.
In the streets.
We must climb to the highest rooftops in this town, in every town. We must proclaim with clarity, with certainty, with sanity, with sensibility, with love. No more senseless, endless, fucking war. Thank you. Let's go.
Thank you.
International Action Center. Get a chance.
I think we're out of here, right? We're all done? We're going to stay together. demanding money for health care, not for war, money for our schools, not for war. No war on Russia, no war, China, no war. And the corporate selling of war.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.